Okay, everyone, I'm sure we'll have some representative committee members straggling in. Everybody's a little busy this week. Again, please excuse me today if you weren't with me yesterday. I have a little bit of a voice issue today, so I will refrain from talking as much as possible. I'll leave that to my members. Yeah, and then when they come, okay. All right, so we're going to, I'm going to call the meeting of the House Game and Fisheries Committee to order. Roll call, please.
Chair Kulik.
Here.
Rep Davison.
Leave.
Rep Doherty.
Leave.
Rep Gentz. Rep Haddock. Rep Harris.
Leave.
Rep Hohenstein. Rep Inglis.
Leave.
Here virtually.
Oh, virtual.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Rep Kazim.
Leave.
Rep Matsey.
Leave.
Rep Mirsky.
Leave.
Rep Rusnick.
Here.
Rep Still.
Leave.
And Rep Young. Okay. Chair Maloney.
Here.
Rep Anderson. Here. Rep Banta. Rep Cook. Rep Devanzo.
Leave.
Rep Kerwin. Rep Kuzma. Rep Labs.
Virtual.
Rep Olsummer.
Virtual.
Oh, virtual,
Leave's
okay.
up there.
Rep Reichert.
Leave.
Rep Smith. And Rep Wentling. We have a quorum.
The purpose of this meeting is to receive the 2024 annual report from the Pennsylvania Fish and Boat Commission. We will be hearing today from Executive Director Tim Schaefer. We're going to do like we did yesterday, folks. We're going to listen. Tim, if you could take 15 minutes for your presentation, then we're going to use a half hour for questions and comments from the members. We'll then move to the members when you're done. So everybody hold any comments till the end. And Director, if you want to introduce anybody who's with you today before you get started, but I'm going to let you get started.
You bet. Happy to.
Thank you.
Yep, and thanks for having me as always. So I'll just go right down the line with the folks on the Fish and Boat Commission who are here. We have Colonel Jeff Sabo, who's the head of our Bureau of Law Enforcement. Don Anderson is our commissioner from District 4, which is Somerset County area. That's where he's from, but a network of counties in that region. Rachel Hirsch is our Strategic Initiatives Coordinator. One of the programs I'm going to talk about is a program that she led dealing with probation officers and using fishing as a tool to work with youth that are in trouble that she's done a great job with. I thought some of the members might like to learn more about that. Bob Cassis, who's a familiar face to a lot of the folks here, is our Director of Policy and Planning. I am happy to say Kaylee Glock will be back from maternity leave. If Kaylee's listening, hello. Home with her baby boy, but she'll be back on March 31st. Laurel Anders is our Deputy Director for Administration. We have two, real main offices, one in Harrisburg and one up in Bellefonte. Laurel's over all of our financial, administrative, outreach, technical services here in Harrisburg. And then Rob Brown is our Deputy for Field Operations. Our other main office is up in Bellefonte. I think a few of you have been there. That's where our hatcheries, fisheries, and engineering staff are based. BJ Small is another one of our commissioners. BJ's from right here in Central PA, lives in Mechanicsburg, so it was an easy commute for him. Happy to have BJ here. And then Mike Parker, who's our communications director, also a familiar face to everyone. And thank you in advance. Thanks for those of you who have done trout stocking videos with us already this year. Thank you for those who are going to be getting out into the field with us. I know there's a group that Representative Hohenstein is going to be hosting in Philadelphia. We'll see you in Pennypack on Friday afternoon. Just thanks for all the work that you guys do to get out in the field with us, and especially those safe boating videos that we'll be doing. So, all righty. With that, I'll jump right in. And again, thanks for the opportunity. I will point out, in addition to the annual report, one of the things that's in your packet go off script a little bit, is a summary of our federal funding. And thanks to our team, Katie Brashear, who's our admin bureau director, helped to pull this together. I've had a lot of questions about the status of our federal funding, and it's about a quarter of our revenue that comes in. There's an excise tax that's, you hear a lot on the game side with guns and ammunition, with the Pittman-Robertson program, but for us, it's called Dingell-Johnson. It's been around since 1950. About 25% of our revenue comes in annually from federal sources. So, you know, while not part of the state budget, we thought it'd be important for you guys just to understand how that worked, and I'd be happy to go into more detail. I will tell you, just because I get the question often these days, have we seen any slowdown in those funds coming in? Not yet, nor do we see a problem with this funding. There may be a little bit slower of an uptake on getting the revenues to us, but these excise tax dollars are paid willingly by fishing tackle, boat manufacturers. It's called the North American Model of Fish and Wildlife Conservation. User pays, user benefits. So the federal the companies pay the tax at the federal level, pass it on to their customers, embed it into the cost of their products, gets collected in the federal treasury, comes back to states like us to reinvest on behalf of their customers. They realize that but for state fish and wildlife agencies, there wouldn't be boat ramps or trout to catch. And so they're happy to contribute in that way. So,
Well, and thank you. I'm hoping that there's no issues with that. That's something in the back of my mind.
yeah, and and I was actually, I was in D.C. recently, just making the case for Pennsylvania as part of a group we have something called the Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies, which is our national, sort of like, and national conference to say legislators for you guys, but they are our eyes and ears in D.C. So I'm happy to provide that.
Otherwise sportsman driven.
It is 100% sportsman driven. And that's, I say it, I probably said it here. Like, I look our staff in the eye and say, can we look an angler and boater in the eye and say we're using your money wisely, right? It's their money. It's not only their money that's licensed dollars, but it's their money that's those excise taxes that are built into the equipment that they use. So absolutely, Representative Maloney, it's their money, not ours, which is why we want to spend it as wisely as possible. With that, I'll jump into my formal remarks, and I'll probably go off script a couple times just because I find it an effective way to do this. But for those of you who don't know me, up on the panel, my name's Tim Schaefer. I'm the Executive Director of the Fish and Boat Commission. It is an absolute pleasure to serve in this role. And on behalf of the Board of Commissioners, Don and BJ are here. On behalf of the full board, our Boating Advisory Board and staff, we're pleased to present this 2024 annual report to the General Assembly. As with past reports, it summarizes major initiatives and progress in the past year and captures highlights and examples from around Pennsylvania. We do have an electronic copy posted on our website. And I will also say, in my opening remarks of the report, like, we do this anyway if we weren't required to. Our statute requires us to provide this annual report to the legislature. Each January is when we actually give it to you, but it's something we willingly do and would do it even if we didn't have to. So our agency is a relatively small Commonwealth state agencies, yet our work impacts all corners of Pennsylvania. In 2024, our nearly 420 full-time and approximately 200 seasonal staff delivered incredible results on behalf of the Commonwealth's anglers, boaters, and aquatic resources. Throughout Pennsylvania and during every season of the year, we work to implement our mission to protect, conserve, and enhance aquatic resources and provide fishing and boating opportunities. You'll see that the theme of this report, and I do want to give a lot of credit to Mike Parker, who's here, and Spring Gerhardt on our communications staff for the work they did in putting this report together, but we like to pick a theme each year for the first couple pages. The rest of it you'll see is organized based upon commissioner districts, which we hope brings some relevance to you guys as well. But the theme up front is partnerships for success, and that's how we get our work done. And a colleague of mine, Robert Boyles, who recently retired from the South Carolina Department of Natural Resources, he liked to say that conservation is a team sport, right? So, March Madness is upon us, so I guess appropriate to talk about a team sport. But it is, and we really, take that seriously here in Pennsylvania. And every single one of the initiatives that you see that our staff is involved in has a partner somewhere in its mix. We don't do our work alone. I said, I think last year, the year before, we punch above our weight as a small agency, but we get that done through partnerships. With the partners that we work with, certainly municipalities in your districts, Representative Bannon and I were just talking about Waterford Borough in his district and going up to maybe to work on a new boat ramp up there that they control next to one of our lakes. But we work a lot with municipalities, nonprofits in your districts, and when we do that, we always try to include you guys in the mix, right? So Representative Rusnak and I, we met at the outdoor show, back in February. We just provided a grant for a new canoe kayak launch in a district or a township in our district. We're going to do a safe boating event there, right? So collaboratively get that message out. But we could not do what we do without a relationship with the General Assembly. So thank you guys for that. Before going into a couple of highlights, I do want to give two messages that I frequently do here. But the first one, and you can probably finish my words before I say it, is wear your life jacket, right? If of all the things that we do, I find nothing more important than getting that word out. And I never like to say numbers because I might jinx it, but we're doing really well in Pennsylvania, like really, really well when it comes to boating safety. And it starts with encouraging your constituents to wear their life jacket. In Pennsylvania, we have a cold water life jacket requirement for November 1st through April 30th. All canoes and kayaks, boats under 16 feet, you have to wear your life jacket. Those are inherently unstable vessels, so we have that requirement, and so that it really works. So thank you for helping us to get that word out. That cold water requirement that's still in effect has cut fatalities in half in the cold weather months. And what's going to be, 75 degrees, today? I mean, people are going to be out. They are going to be already be out in mid-March. Who would have thought? But as they are out, that water is still deadly cold. So please make sure that folks are wearing their life jackets. The other thing that really want to highlight are the partnerships that are focused, that are highlighted in this report. Again, they are replete throughout each and every one of the things that we've mentioned, and I'll get to a couple of them in detail later. But it's that emphasis on partnerships and working collaboratively. It's how I operate. It's how everybody behind me operates, and you guys are a big part of that. Do want to extend a formal invitation to get into the field. Most of you, if not all of you, have taken advantage of that opportunity with us to get out, to go on a trout stocking that we're in the midst of right now. See a habitat project. Representative Maloney, and I can picture it was you and Representative Barton and Joswiak literally like pounding boards together at a Blue Marsh Lake, right, to put those things in the lake there for fish habitat. So really encourage you to get out in the field to see the work that we're doing. We're going to be having the Chesapeake Bay Commission. I don't think any members here are on that, but the legislative members up to see some of our habitat work in Mifflinburg and Union County in a couple weeks. So the stream bank restoration that we're doing, the lake habitat work that we're doing, surveys for game and non-game species, get out at night with night electrofishing, see the surveys that we do for timber rattlesnakes that are one of our trust species. Would love to get you out to see that work. Visit a fish hatchery if you haven't been there. I talked about those angler and boater dollars being put to work. One of the things we're doing is making historic investments in our hatchery system and the trucks and the equipment that our staff uses. So please come join us there. Safe boating or water rescue training, love to show that off. A number of you have been to, and I know we have one tomorrow in Berks County at Berks Nature. The legislative lunches that we do, each winter that a number of you have been to or will be attending. We're going to be doing one next week up in Center County, and for that, we're going to actually highlight the water rescue training that we're doing for our current class of cadets. If that's something that's of interest to you, would love to get you out. You should know that if there is a first responder in your district, a volunteer fire company, water rescue, or river rescue, that training starts with us. A guy named Ryan Walt on our staff does it better than anybody in the country. And we develop the curriculum, we train the trainers to get out and make sure that those first responders are safe. So love to get you out with us. The last thing I'll note, if you'd want to do a ride along with one of our WCOs, always happy to have you do that. If you do get out, you will see, and again, I'll go off script and sort of go out of order here. We've completed a 3-year boat replacement plan. We have 26 new boats now in service. And Colonel Sabo, before his current position, was our lieutenant colonel, who was essentially our quartermaster, who was in charge of getting all the right boats on the water and the right equipment that needs to be out there. So if you do join a WCO in the water, you will see that they've got better equipment than ever. I'll also give, thanks to, I know Steve Smith of the Game Commission, who was here yesterday. We've also now equipped our officers with better technology. Up until recently, we were still writing paper tickets and walking them to the courthouse. We now have an e-filing system that you can use that's much more efficient. We have something called Pocket Ward, where the officers can look at stuff on their phone really efficiently. Again, thanks to the Game Commission for helping us to build that and making sure that these platforms are interchangeable among the officers. So a couple dates that I'd like to point out. Mentored Youth Trout Day, which is March 29th. That's where we open trout season a week early for kids. A ton of fun if you'd like to get out there and join us for one of those in your district. Representative Kerwin, no place like the children's area on Clark's Creek where my kids cut their teeth, and we still have a trout hanging in our room in our house that one of the boys caught there. So it's a great day to get out there on the first day for kids, which is March 29th, and then the opening day of trout season, which is really our big day, our Christmas, Super Bowl, whatever you want to call it, which is April 5th statewide. National Safe Boating Week, May 17th through 23rd. That's when we make an absolutely concerted effort to get that safe boating message out that so many of you are a part of. Representative Cook and I were talking a little while ago. We're going to do an event in his district. If any of you would like to collaborate with us on a district on National Safe Boating Week, we're all in. Forward Township, for example, would be a great place to do that. Representative Kuzma. So always looking for opportunities to get that message out. We do have 2 Fish for Free days. Those are legislatively mandated. We can pick when we do them, and our marketing staff have always thought, well, let's do it when people are out recreating. So we do it over Memorial Day weekend and 4th of July. That'll be May 25th and July 4th this year. And then Operation Dry Water is an annual event that we do in collaboration with law enforcement really throughout the country, including the Pennsylvania State Police. But these are concerted efforts to keep impaired boaters off the water. Reminder, the rules for boating under the influence, BUI, are the same as driving under the influence, DUI. And we want to keep impaired boaters off the water. Jeff and others in law enforcement, we talk all the time. And if everybody wore their life jackets and you eliminated impaired boaters, it already is pretty safe out there, but it'd be really safe out there. So if you'd like to see what we do during Operation Dry Water, that'd be a really neat time to get out and do a ride along. On the third page here, we do have a summary of some of the statistics. I get questions all the time. Where are we with license sales? And we're doing pretty darn good. The barometer right now for all state fish and wildlife agencies across the country is pre-COVID, so 2019. So COVID hit, everything spiked. We're up a little less than 1% since 2019 in fishing license sales. And for a state with an aging population, with more and more people getting into the senior license category, that's something that we should be proud of. And our 2 of our staff members, Kim Garris and Janelle Howard, just presented at a national conference on the way that they're using data and technology to drive license sales and to attract non-traditional audiences. And I've had some people say, well, I haven't seen any of that marketing material. And Kim will say, that's because you're not my audience. You already buy a license. So they're really being targeted with who they're trying to hit. Trout permits, and I should note, when we talk about licensed anglers, it's not just licensed sales. So I have a 5-year fishing license. I didn't buy a license this year, but I'm still included into that calculation. So it's about licensed anglers, people that have an active fishing license, about 825,000. Our trout permits, admittedly, we're down a little bit from last year, but have been relatively steady. If anybody remembers the opening day, and Mike Parker sure does, because we shifted from a message of, get out and go fishing to stay out of the raging torrent of water. Don spends part of his time stocking trout with cooperative nurseries in southwestern PA. And if you don't remember, we sure do. It just rained and rained and rained before the opening day of trout season. And for an agency that so heavily relies on trout permit sales as part of our revenue, we saw a dip. I mean, there's no 2 ways about it. So, but I am happy to say that for the rest of the year, though, we saw license sales outperform the previous week, but for that week. So we climbed back a little bit, but those trout permits, while down a little bit last year, remained relatively steady. The thing where we do see the growth, and everybody's seeing the growth, is unpowered boats, which is why, again, so I could, just about everybody, up here has some municipality in their district or some group that's focused on, Schuylkill River. Oh my gosh, I mean, it's everywhere, right? People are canoeing, kayaking everywhere. Those have been the unpowered launch permits up about 20% since 2019. Reminder, to use a state-owned launch, since we don't receive general fund revenue, you either need to register your unpowered craft or get a launch permit. We actually advise doing the registration because that allows for, then you actually get a number, we get your data in-house, the boat gets stolen, the boat gets washed away, our WCOs can go out and maybe track it down for you. But those numbers continue to climb. Boat registrations, they are down a little over 5% since 2019, and I think a lot of that, we're sure a lot of that was thanks to some high gas prices in recent years. But those are really the things that drive our revenue. And this is where I will sort of go off script a little bit, because I know that yesterday you guys asked some questions about the fund balances for the Game Commission. So I wanted to proactively let you know. What's that? I will admit I wasn't watching it, but Bob and Laurel were. I was doing something else, but I got briefed on it. So with the fund balances, so reminder, we have a fish fund and a boat fund. Those are legislatively created funds that we have where all of our money goes in. And I've been in this position for a little over 6 years now, and working with the board, we came up with an internal rule of a 70% rule, where we would keep no more than 70% of annual revenues in reserve. And the reason we felt we needed to keep that amount, and believe me, before then it was higher than that, and we've been investing that into all the equipment and upgrades that I've been talking about. That 70% really would capture a couple things. One, if there would be, say, loss of revenue, and this really was a very real possibility during COVID when everything was shutting down. Right in the spring, we thought, oh my gosh, we're not going to get our federal reimbursements, and that would have been a 25% hole in our budget. So we need to keep money in reserve for those emergencies. If there'd be an outage with our Hunt Fish PA system, I mean, so many people are buying their licenses this way. If there would be some catastrophic failure of that license system, that would be a big problem. So we need money in the bank. If there'd be a natural disaster that would maybe rip through Center County and wipe out 3 of our fish hatcheries, we want to have money in reserve to deal with those contingencies. And then another reason we need reserve is because cash flow. Right now, our available balance, like strictly available, is $9 million. And you think, oh my gosh, $9 million is because license sales are about to go through the roof. We basically live off of what we make in the spring throughout the year. So numbers are down now. Yeah, numbers are down now, and that's sort of by design each year. But with that 70% reserve, right now in our restricted accounts, and I know Representative Haddock had some of these questions, we have $80 million in restricted reserves. And when I say, yes, sir, 80 million in restricted reserves. And these are for commitments that we have, a dam in one of your districts that we need to rebuild for $7 million that we have banked. The next wave of hatchery trucks, feed contracts, other grants, and frankly, a good example would be, those of you that we've awarded grants to for boat ramps in your districts. Those are commitments. We're not going to spend that on something else. So we've got about 80 million in restricted reserves. Our unrestricted reserves right now is about $56 million. You'll look back on whatever page it is about our finances in the report, which is on page 29, about $74 million of annual revenue. That $56 million is right around that 70%. That's all we're keeping in reserve. We want to do that for the reasons that I mentioned. So those are the numbers that we have banked. We are talking right now with appropriations staff about, and this is sort of a preview of coming attractions, but with our oil company franchise tax, the motorboat fuel tax revenue that we get annually gets deposited into the boat fund. But I talked about those federal dollars, right? Most of this federal money comes from federal fuel taxes. When those federal fuel tax dollars come to agencies like ours, we can use those monies for either fish or boat purposes. And you'll see on the back, if anybody's ever worried about how we're using it, spelled out right there. So what we're looking for is to see if we get some flexibility with our own boat fuel dollars to use them for fish fund purposes as well as boat fund purposes. And if we did that, we're confident that we could avoid a fishing license increase for the foreseeable future. That would allow us to maintain what we're that 70% unrestricted reserve, and then keep the license fees where they are, which is a good. And if you need to cut me off, Chair, at any point, I'll just keep going. But I did want to thank you guys. On the next page, that license fee authority is a good segue from what I just talked about. Thank you to this entire committee, and notably Representatives Kulik and Maloney for being the co-prime sponsors of House Bill 1409 that became Act 129. That reauthorized our agency's ability, the commissioner's ability, to set our own license fees. That is an incredibly unique authority that my counterparts across the country are frankly still astounded that we got. And I attribute that to the relationship and the confidence that the legislature has in our board. That extends our authority to set our own fees through 2035. Since we've had the authority, we've only used it twice, and no plans next year to use it again.
I want to just interrupt you there for a little bit and give you a kudos to a little bit of history for my colleagues that may not know how that took place. There was concern about where that could go, and so there's a resolution possibility that could stop it from the House or the Senate, so I wanted my colleagues to know that. But at the end of the day, there was also a request that we had of you, and that, I know it was my personal request, and that was that you would show us your work. And one of those challenges that you didn't really put out there until after you did your detail was the historical reasons for why certain fees were where they were. And so I think it's important to know that that was thoroughly thought out, and it was functional in the fact that where does this money go? And you even had a request that we said, no, that's too much. And, for the good of the body, that was adjusted. And so I just wanted to give that shout outs because a lot of people don't know some of the historical ways those things took place. So thank you.
Well, thank you. And I didn't represent, I remember the day being in your office where you asked that question and opened the laptop, and there we go. So, and if anybody ever has other questions about things that we're doing, about anything that I've talked about, anything in this report, anything in your district that's even remotely connected to what we do, just let us know. Call me, call Bob, call Kaylee, call one of your district officers. We're happy to share that with you. So a couple other thank yous from last year. Thank you, Senator Jim Brewster, who it's really strange being in this building without Jim. He had a bill that was actually Act 1 from last year that allowed us to provide therapeutic recreational exemptions for fishing licenses for Project Healing Waters, Wounded Warriors, breast cancer recovery. That was a really good bill. And then Senator Langerholtz had Act 51, which created a sportsman's license plate, which we in the Game Commission direct revenues from that for youth education. How am I doing on time here? Want to open for questions or want me to keep going? A minute. All right. Got it. Well, then I'll hit two things with a minute. Two things. And one, I mentioned Rachel at the beginning. And just know that she's here. If you guys have any questions about one of the programs that was mentioned, it's a really neat program where we work with probation departments. We're currently in Dauphin, Lebanon, Cumberland, York, and Northampton counties, and we're gaining momentum in Perry, Union, Mercer, Washington, and Montour counties, where we work with probation officers to use fishing as a tool to work with lesser first-time offenders and to try to prevent them from re-entering that criminal justice system. It's reducing recidivism, it's a tough word to say, recidivism, increasing community protection. We are actually training those probation officers in how to do fishing skills instruction. And we've got a couple of those instructions taking place in March through May. So if that sounds like of interest to you, love to connect you with Rachel here. Last thing I'll note is one of the things that the legislature provided to us was the ability to do calendar year boat registrations. They used to, that was 2 sessions ago now. It used to be that boat registrations were on a basis where they expire March 31st. Having that be consistent with the calendar year basis has been wildly more efficient for the boaters. You can now renew your boat registration at the same time you're getting your fishing license. And then also hats off to our administrative staff. For decades, we had a backlog in registrations. And, you know, how many times did Kaylee get a call in the spring from one of your constituents, where's my boat registration? I'm happy to say we're caught up for the first time that anybody can remember. And, you know, hats off to our just really crackerjack administrative team and all the work that they've done. So hopefully that will be fewer calls to your offices this spring. But if you do ever get a call, please let us know. We'll be happy to take care of that. So I think I'll skip the rest of my remarks and happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, and everyone, you have the report, so all this very interesting things that are on this page 4, we're really happy about, and thank you for doing all the programs that you do. We'll move into some questions but before we do that, I just want to let everybody know that David Michael is leaving us, or has left us. This is his last meeting with us. He's moved up to an ED position. So we're going to miss you. We'll have your replacement soon, but we loved having you, so thank you, David.
And a personal thank you to David, Representative Kulik's House Bill 103 that's scheduled for a vote next Monday. David played a critical role in putting that together. It's really a nationally groundbreaking piece of legislation dealing with abandoned and derelict vessels. So thanks, David.
Yeah, thank you, and we're going to miss you. You've done a great job for us. Rep. Anderson, and folks, can we keep it? When we get to you, Rep. Haddock, I'm going to ask you not to take 10 minutes like yesterday, okay? But let's start with Representative Anderson.
Well, thank you for your testimony, sir. I just want to first give a shout out to Bob Sassis. I asked him a question about a fish kill, and he got back to me very quickly with detailed information, so I appreciate that. But I want to ask a question on that. We had a constituent call me about a fish kill in my district near York Haven, Bruner Island, where there's an electric company. As Bob had let me know, they determined, DEP responded with one of your conservation officers and determined it was because of cooling towers being turned off in the electric company, which after investigation found at least 50 fish, so I'm sure it was a lot more. We have moving water, obviously, on the Susquehanna. And they were required to let us know when the temperature of the water was in excess change of 6 degrees, and they did not. They did not tell us about the towers or the fish. And according to Mr. Sassis's email, the DEP and federal FERC are responsible for regulating those towers, but obviously the Fish and Boat Commission are responsible for the fish species within the river. So I wanted to ask, are there any penalties for these types of violations? And is there anything the Fish and Boat Commission can do to prevent this? I don't feel confident just turning it over to DEP or the federal government and saying, yeah, we'll take care of it. So I'm just asking either what are you doing or what can you do, not just for this specific one, but for these kinds of incidents across the Commonwealth.
Yep, and out of the corner of my eye, I saw Jeff sit straight up. So Jeff, if you could join me if you could join me up here. We don't need the microphone. And I'll maybe take the second part of the question. I'll turn it over to Jeff for the second. So in terms of prevention, so we work with DEP on permit requirements. So when permits get reissued for facilities like that, we embed in them certain requirements to make sure these things like this don't happen. So whether it's entrainment in pipes that are going into the facility, what water temperatures are, we advise DEP on what those permits should look like. So we absolutely have a seat at the table. As far as, and you can pull that over. So as far as, how we, hit on the on button, as far as how we calculate penalties, Jeff, if you could explain how we do that, whether it's Bruner Island or anywhere else.
Sounds rudimentary, but we actually have what we call a fish kill tally sheet that lists all the different species we have, from trout to bass to even our minnow species. Each one of them is assigned a dollar value based upon size. So in such an instance, the officer will go through that fish kill tally sheet, count 7 channel catfish, 40 smallmouth bass of different size, and then come up with a dollar amount that would be applied to that fish kill. And then because this situation is currently ongoing, I can't speak too much about it, but yes, we have the opportunity to get replacement costs for those fish that were killed in such an instance.
And those dollars, something called the Blue Book, the American Fisheries Society publishes that on a regular basis. And so it's not us just, winging it on what the estimates are. So those are established values that we rely on. And in addition to our officers, we have a division of environmental services that's based up in Bellefonte. Those are those staff are the ones who work with those permit reviews, do that analysis. There are times where we need to have those environmental services staff go out and assist with that investigation to help to calculate the loss, because it's not just maybe the recreational fish species that we think about, but Representative Cook, we were down on Dunkard Creek, and it was 10 years ago now or more. There was a big fish kill there, but that included also freshwater mussels, other non-game species. So in those cases, we do have our biologists assist. And I have to really thank the way our biologists work with our WCOs. They really do operate as a team.
All right. Thank you, sir.
Yep, thank you.
Okay, now we are out of here at 5 minutes to the hour because tourism needs the room for voting meetings. So Representative Cook and Haddock, you got about 3 minutes each, okay? And we'll go to Rep. Haddock.
I just want to go on record. Steve Smith's answers were long.
I know.
Thank you, Tim. You went off script. You gave a lot of information that we don't have in writing. And I'm glad that you ad-libbed and you answered some questions. So between your reserve fund and your restricted fund, you're sitting on about $136 million by your testimony then.
Yep.
So there's a total of $136 million there. Good. What we don't hear, and I'm going to go back to the gas, I love the testimony where you're a small agency all the time, but 73 million, 420 employees-ish.
Yeah.
It's not that small.
Right.
So the gas and oil, how much money do you actually receive per year from your gas leases?
So, Laura, what's it about annually? Just about $1 million. So we have relatively small properties, and we actually I'm happy to share the accounting of that on where we've got leases under our. We don't have any gas wells on our property, but there's directional drilling under a few of them, but about $1 million.
Okay, thank you for that. I've never really heard that figure. And again, with your report, so there seems to be a direction of the Fish Commission moving away, and instead of stocking a lot of brook and rainbow, brook and brown trout, you seem to be going towards a direction of rainbow. Is it expense? Is it easier to grow? What is the concern? As a fisherman, I know when there's stock, and I'm hearing it in the field from my constituents, a lot of the lakes in particular, the rainbows seem to disappear. We catch the brook trout and we catch a brownie. That's the top of the apex, right? But the rainbows seem to be cagier and go out to deeper water, and particularly in our lakes and streams. So what is the movement and why? Why are we concentrating on, like right now we're over 2 million rainbow?
Yep. So a couple reasons. One, with the brook trout, one of the things we want to make sure is, and we talked a lot about, the opening day in our stocking program, but Pennsylvania is blessed to have some of the best wild trout waters in maybe even the world. I mean, certainly in the country. And the brook trout is our native fish, our the only native trout species that we have. It's our state fish, and we want to do everything we can to protect those species. So we want to minimize the risk for any sort of disease to be transported transferred from stocked brooks to the wild brook trout. So we're really making a conscious effort to make sure there's not any integration between the stocked brook trout and the wild fish. We don't see an impact if you've got rainbow trout that are in streams. We're not seeing an impact there to other native species that are right in the locations that we stock. I will admit that we have it's just a handful, about 20 Class A streams that we stock that we do stock with hatchery trout, and we monitor those closely. We're not seeing a negative impact that we would think should result in the curtailment of stocking there. So we're really mindful of those wild brook trout. There is something to the fish culture. Those rainbows grow really well in our hatchery system. Rob's here if you want to add anything to that. But I think it's a combination of residency of the fish in the streams, and I'd be happy to talk to you about some of those lakes where you're not seeing that. But
All right.
residency in the streams, protecting those wild brook trout, and also production.
And then last, if I could, real quick, the flathead catfish in the Susquehanna River.
Yeah.
They have caught hold and they're growing
Yep.
exponentially. And before you were executive director, other states, when the flathead catfish are found, they put out mandates to the hunters, or the fishermen, to keep them, get them out of the streams. Pennsylvania let this happen. And now we're not stopping it in Pennsylvania. In fact, we've gone into 2 other states with the flathead. And my concern and my question is now, and however they get from the Susquehanna River to other areas, what's going to be the policy going forward? They are an apex predator. They are an invasive species. They are not native. What's the feeling of when we start finding them in other bodies of water?
And Tim, if you can be real or answer this after
Okay.
the meeting, if we can do that. Is that okay, Rep? Thank you.
Sure.
Rep Cook?
I'll try to be much better on my 3 minutes. Mr. Executive Director, I want to publicly thank you personally and your team for the turnaround since my freshman year here. It's night and day with the commission since you've taken things. So we want to publicly do that. Also, I don't know very many people that could go get me to stand in a stream up to my knees in water restocking for 2 hours. So we really appreciate that. I want to share with our committee members that you have 4 educationally approved programs for high school students, and we've introduced it into our district and some of our schools. I would definitely try to follow up with the executive director. It's always good when you see a busload of students go to the stream to release the trout that they grew in their classroom, do soil sampling, water testing, and fish for an hour. It's getting them out there. So really good programs. Finally, for my colleagues, I think the most impressive number that I remember as a freshman is we have 80,000 plus miles of navigable streams in the Commonwealth. And I never forgot that number. So to you and your team, Mr. Executive Director, thank you for all you do out there.
Thank you.
Thank you. And we've got 10 minutes. I will absolutely gavel out at 5:02. Rep Maloney.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, a couple things I'm just going to run through real quick just so I can be as effective as possible. And again, to what Rep Cook mentioned, that many times you have, and I know you're limited to the different things that we want to go over, but, I've been a sort of a broken record here since the day I came with respect to the passion and what I have envisioned as the next generation and the need to enhance and to mentor and to feed that. A couple things of points of interest. My grandson's name is Brooke. My daughter, who didn't hunt, not for purposes other than that she was a little peewee, she's my fisherwoman, and she's amazing. And that all happened on the side of a stream and in a boat on the lake, mentoring her, and it took off. And so now with her 3 children, it's amazing. So there's an effectiveness in this that I want to go to Trout in the Classroom is one of those amazing programs that you can get in your schools. And, you know, I have always believed in giving kudos where they belong. And the 70% for my colleagues, if you didn't know where that came from a concern that the legislative body had years ago about where the monies would go, how it would be utilized, and that you wouldn't drain the account so that an increase wouldn't happen, because we all know that when an increase happens, we lose license sales. For whatever ancillary reason that may be, we know that that's the statistic. So good information today and good things to tie into my colleagues. The probationary program, I think that's awesome. I think those are sort of the examples of life to, you know, reach out to humans that may have a different struggle than you do. So, you know, those things to me are why we need to do this. Why the Game Commission just doesn't get it. You'll hear a lot of that from me because these are real factual proofs that what you're doing is working, okay? I'm glad Rep. Anderson asked the question he did. I was out of town. I was asked to come there. I got sort of some hits on that, was going to come down there and see for my own self, so I'm glad you guys didn't. I asked him to sort of present that question in such a way that we can understand it. Your website. I am concerned with the executive order that went out. I have had multiple people tell me, that's why I brought it up yesterday with the Game Commission, and it was flat out dishonest because it is not navigable as it was before. So I want to just put that out there. You don't even have to comment on it, but as independent agencies, I see a crossover here that's problematic to me.
So, and I will say that, you know, the content that's on there is we control that completely.
Yeah, and it's the way it should be. And you know, accountability is real, but I mean, that's the way it should be. I don't want any interference, and I don't think the sportsmen do, because I've heard a lot about it. So I'm just going to wrap up with the fact that, you know, it's one of the reasons why my tour of the state is working well, and I'm getting a lot of sportsmen having the opportunity to ask these questions, to bring it forward. I will say that you've always been transparent in that respect, and I feel that that is very effective and very honest. But for law enforcement, I do have a question with respect to, I know I was pretty direct, usually am, with the open fields doctrine. So have you, as an organization, revisited how that is used?
So because there is a current lawsuit, I couldn't discuss that at this point.
No, I'm not talking about that particular one. I'm talking about the use of and how that got used as a reconsideration going forward, so we don't, you know, I like to avoid the black eyes for the sportsmen and such.
Yeah, and
Yeah, I understand if this is something you can't answer at this point.
at this point, just because there is an open lawsuit that's talking about the use of that procedure, I'm just not at liberty to talk about it at this
All right,
point.
well, then my question would be this simple. Will you consider revisiting the use of that open fields doctrine?
I can't talk about the open field doctrine because of the open legislation or open lawsuit.
That's fair, but it also sort of makes more questions. So thank you.
Understood.
Okay, thank you. We are adjourned. I appreciate the meeting. Game and Fish folks, please leave as quickly as possible. The tourism folks are already sitting in here. Much like we did yesterday, let's get out of Dodge, and thank you.